Hi, my name's Catherine. I'm a clinical psychologist and I have alopecia. In this video, I'm going to talk about telling people that we're wearing a wig. Some people who wear wigs worry a lot about others knowing. One way to alleviate this worry is to tell them. If you know they know, you don't have to worry about whether or not they know. Following? There can be a sense of shame from wearing a wig. Shame researcher Brené Brown says that shame derives its power from being unspeakable. If we don't speak about what is bringing us a sense of shame, then the shame is allowed to grow. She proposes the antidote to shame is empathy. And empathy can only exist between you and another person if they know about what is going on for you. So, if what is going on for you is adjusting to life with alopecia or transitioning to wearing a wig, then a way to reduce the shame around it is to talk about it and give others the opportunity to empathize with you. Now, that is all quite philosophical. Needless to say, I think that speaking about it is good for our mental health. So, I want to talk about some of the practicalities of telling others that you're wearing a wig. So, it's going to depend on the context. How well do you know the person? Did it come up naturally, or do you need to introduce the topic? Often it will come up naturally with someone saying something along the lines of, "I like your hair." You are under no obligation to disclose anything at this point. If you are not up for the conversation, you can simply say, "Thanks." But if you're feeling brave, you can deliver a simple, "Thanks, it's actually a wig." Or, if you want to provide further explanation, "Thanks, it's actually a wig. I wear wigs because I have alopecia." If that's all you want to say, you can quickly redirect the conversation with a question about them. But if you're up for the conversation, allow them to digest what you've just said and ask any follow-up questions they might have. Now, sometimes it might not come up organically, and if you want to speak about it, you'll actually need to introduce the topic. Choosing a moment when the other person isn't distracted and you both have some time for it, simply saying, "Hey, I wanted to bring something up with you that might feel a bit random, but you may have noticed my hair is different. That's because I've decided to start wearing wigs." And the conversation can flow naturally from there. It's always hardest to start the conversation. And it can be worth choosing someone who you are fairly confident will have a positive response when you're first disclosing this information, and build up to the people who might have a more tricky or unsupportive response. Because the reality is sometimes people might have responses you don't like. They might say something ignorant or that you find hurtful. Try not to take this personally. This reflects their own lack of understanding rather than that there is anything wrong with you. Also, try not to overestimate the likelihood of this. The vast majority of people won't say something ignorant or hurtful. This will be a rare exception rather than the rule. Most people will say something nice and supportive, or perhaps they simply won't know what to say. In which case, you might notice that they appear uncomfortable, and that's okay too. It's not your responsibility to make others feel comfortable. I know personally, sometimes I've avoided this conversation not because I'm worried about my feelings, but because I don't want someone else to feel uncomfortable. Particularly if they thought they were giving me an innocuous compliment of, "I like your new haircut." And this is okay too. It's not your job to educate every person you cross paths with about alopecia. For the casual acquaintance, it is perfectly acceptable to just say, "Thanks," and move on. It can be tiring to have the same conversation over and over again. But for those people that you want a closer connection with, or you share more than a casual acquaintance with, I personally feel that it's worth sharing. By sharing a vulnerability, you create the space for a more meaningful connection with another person. And it can reduce some of the social anxiety you might experience associated with wearing a wig. If you avoid talking about it, it can actually make you more anxious because we often think people's reactions will be worse than they actually are, and we underestimate our ability to cope with their reactions. With this in mind, if you're feeling anxious about talking about wearing a wig, I encourage you to do an experiment. So firstly, Think of someone to tell. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're new to doing this, pick someone you are fairly confident will give you a positive response. Secondly, make a list of all the things you're worried about when it comes to telling them. Thirdly, tell them. Pick a time when no one is distracted or rushing off to the next thing. Give them an opportunity to be curious and supportive. Final step is look back at the list of things you were worried about and see how many of those things actually came to fruition. And if any of them did, how did you cope? Anxiety often comes from overestimating the threat. So in this case, overestimating the likelihood of a negative response and underestimating our ability to cope. So in this case, our ability to cope with whatever another's response might be. I would love to hear about the outcome of this experiment if you give it a go. I've put my email here. You can contact me at catherine@cmtpsychology.com.au. Thanks for watching. Bye.